Hello everyone and welcome to the second part of our presentation of our findings on neurodiversity in engineering. In this second part, we are focusing on what we call getting in, namely attraction, recruitment and selection. Let's start though with some initial challenges that our participants faced before entering the actual profession. At this point, I would just like also to highlight that all our participants felt that engineering was their natural home and they've always dreamed of becoming an engineer because of their natural interests. However, despite of this attraction to the profession, if you wish, they faced some barriers, mostly because of their experiences in formal education, which unfortunately this included some traumatic experiences and stigmatization. As these participants did not perform as well academically as they could have done with the right support, they did not manage to get high grades to go to the university to start engineering. However, many of them became engineers through apprenticeships, and this worked really well for them because through the apprenticeships they had the opportunity to prove their value in the workplace, show their strengths, and then in this way they stayed in the profession and they progressed. Similarly, many of them, and especially those who got a diagnosis later in life, did not do very well at university, and this had implications on their confidence and career prospects. Here, Josh says, I got a degree, but I didn't get a great mark in my degree, so I came out without a lot of confidence. And as we all know, all graduate schemes offered at the moment require at least a 2-1 as a degree, and we can expect that this might not be achievable by every student, and especially those who are not diagnosed yet. So now let's pay more attention to the recruitment process itself. So once they chose to become engineers, what happens next? So how do they go for jobs in the sector? 91% of our survey respondents felt there were barriers in the recruitment process for neurodivergent people, which in itself is a very worrying finding. So if we look into the phases of recruitment more closely, so first of all, nearly none of the survey respondents did not disclose during the recruitment. Only 30% disclosed, because they were all aware of the stigma and lack of awareness around neurodiversity. This is a quote from one of our interviewees, Heidi. I think I'd like people to meet me before they actually make a sort of judgment, because I think there is quite a lot of negativity around if you say you're autistic. I don't think people understand it well enough. The very few participants who disclosed during the recruitment did so only when the organization was openly inclusive towards neurodivergent candidates. And again, these quotes come from our interviews. The only time I've disclosed it is with my current employer, because they were all over it on the application process, that they welcomed applications from neurodiverse people. So it was the first time I declared it, before or during the application process. So if we start with the idea that very few of our applicants disclose, what is happening in our recruitment practices? So let's start with the job descriptions and job applications. Most participants found job descriptions rather difficult to decipher. Here's a quote from Max. A lot of the job descriptions that I have seen from this company, you have absolutely no idea what you're doing day to day. So you get some vague, wishy-washy, high-level stuff that someone from corporate has put in that has nothing to do with what you are doing. And you've somehow got to try and work out what. And this is a very important finding, because sometimes HR practitioners know exactly what they mean if, for example, they require strong communication skills. But it is not necessarily clear how this is translated into the specific role and how this is translated by different individuals applying for this role as well. The same was also for CVs and cover letters. Here we've got a quote from Samuel, who's autistic, dyslexic, and dyspraxic, about cover letters. I find it very difficult. I wish you could just do a sort of maybe a PowerPoint slide or a PowerPoint presentation. Say, this is me, show this is my skill set. Because again, they felt constrained to write in a certain way that did not necessarily play their strengths. And also, writing a CV or a job application. Here we've got a quote from Emily. And then another barrier was my CV and having to be clear and concise when an autistic person tends to bramble and not quite understand what you're supposed to put where. So again, we're all aware, and it's quite understandable that when we write a job application, etc., you are given, let's say, a limit of 200 words to write something about yourself. How much support do we offer about what needs to go there? How clear is the question we ask? And is it clear for everyone? Moving on to the selection process now. So let's start with interviews, which is one of the most common selection processes in HR practice. Interviews were not experienced as daunting when they were exclusively technical. So this is a quote from Toby. You're just answering questions about your experience and about the role, and it's not really a sort of social interaction. So Toby is autistic, and his priority, he just wanted technical, specific questions that he gave an answer to. And also this quote from Sebastian here, that and actually all ADHD participants had the same experience. They did not know how to deal. They did not know if they replied appropriately. The generic HR questions like, tell me how you see yourself in 5 years, and so on and so forth, because they could not see how these are relevant to their roles, while they flourished when they were asked about specific technical skills and questions. Also, another challenge of the current format of selection interviews was around presenting oneself. So there's a language that you should use in interviews and present yourself in your best light. It took me quite a few years to master that and hold back, not lie, but just hold back with the truth. So here we see how participants mask their neurodiversity traits, how they build a persona that would tick neurotypical boxes. Things like engaging in eye contact, not fidgeting, and so on, so forth. And also, there was an issue around communicating their ideas in a specific neurotypical way. Okay, so they had to train themselves in doing so. We've got here a quote from Max about because ADHD and dyslexic participants said that sometimes, while the solution was very clear in their head, they could not necessarily communicate it clearly with others, and they needed more time to elaborate on it, but this will cost you in an interview setting. Okay, so the question was, do we value more the actual result, like if someone can be a good engineer or not, or how quickly they answer a question? Lastly, many participants, especially those dyspraxic and those with ADHD, had some challenges and needed more support with finding the venue of interviews. This does not necessarily have to do with the task itself, but it's an integral part of the selection process, because as we all know, we pay equal attention to other the way someone presents themselves, if they were punctual, and so on, so forth. However, we need to bear in mind, how easy is it for our participants to find the venue? How much support do we provide? And do we signpost it adequately once they arrive at the organization, and so on? Moving now to other selection tasks, all participants with dyslexic and with ADHD had some challenges around written exams, tests for selection purposes. This was because, as you might be aware of, in education settings, students are given extra time to complete written exercises, exams, and so on. However, this is not necessarily an option in the workplace when they are given to complete these short tests. At least I'm not aware of an organization that gives reasonable adjustments or extra time for these sort of tasks. And this stressed them, and of course they did not perform as well as they can. Also, psychometric tests and other similar metrics were found problematic. So we've got here two quotes from an autistic and a dyslexic participant. So challenges with the verbal reasoning and things like, and also like in terms of psychometric tests, many of them were worried that they would pick up the fact that they were neurodivergent and they wouldn't select them for the job. So this created an additional layer of stress for them. But things were not only negative, of course, as all participants found ways to overcome some of these challenges. A very common approach was that many participants said that they preferred to collaborate with recruiters to find a job, because they felt that they could have a chat with a person so that they could explain their career journey, any ups and downs. And in this way, the recruiters could understand their strengths and their skill set better, and then help them to get in. Okay, so we've got this quote from John here, who is dyslexic and dyspraxic. The recruiters spoke to me and knew me well enough that they were confident to put me forward, and the CV went directly to the right people rather than through the kind of front door filters and the front door people who are just checking all of the CVs and maybe not fully understanding what the role, what is required for a role. And this is also something to bear in mind. Because sometimes when we see a career gap, like in the CV, or lower grades or things like that, we tend to not to take into consideration that CV, but what's the story behind it? And do we give the opportunity to the applicants to tell us their story? And also, once they got in a profession, then they relied a lot on what we called word of mouth and personal recommendations. So because they had already proven their value, people were recommending them to other departments or for promotion, and this worked very well for them instead of the traditional routes for career progression through formal processes. Last but not least, many of and increasingly so, the participants paid particular attention to how inclusive the organizations they applied for a job appeared to be. Things like looking on their website and their newsletters. So what information are organizations sharing? Things like the gender pay gap, people with disabilities that they employ, and so on, and how realistic this is. And also some of them chose to have a chat with the hiring manager to see how this person works, if they can work well with, etc., to make sure that this is the right team and the right organization for them to work for. And the office environment. So we've got two quotes here from two autistic participants who paid particular attention to the working space. So here Toby says, for example, if the office environment is a good one, one of the things that attracted me was, let's say when it was company A, this is anonymized of course, we were in an open plan office and I do not cope well with distractions. I need proper quiet to work. And when I moved to current employer, we were two in an office and it was very, very quiet. So they made sure that when they applied for a job and they had a chat with the hiring manager or they went there for the interview, they checked also the space. So this is a very good recommendation for recruitment practice when we advertise a job, etc. Do we give the opportunity for applicants to ask questions about the office environment or anything else that is important for them? Next stop, getting on once in their workplace.